Did you know that the happiest people over 70 have one thing in common? They know what not to share. In today's world where everyone shares everything online, sometimes we forget that privacy isn't just about being secretive. It's about creating healthy boundaries that protect our well-being. I've spent many years researching how privacy affects our peace of mind, especially as we get older, and I want to share what I've learned with you today. Privacy is like having a sanctuary, a special place where you can just be yourself without feeling judged or having to explain yourself to others. It's not about hiding or being dishonest. It's about having control over your personal information and deciding who gets to know what about your life. Research shows that people over 70 who maintain healthy privacy boundaries actually report feeling happier and more at peace than those who share everything with everyone. It makes sense when you think about it. There's a certain wisdom in being selective about what you share and with whom. So, let's dive into these 5 areas where a little privacy can go a long way toward protecting your peace of mind. First on our list is financial information. I can't stress enough how important it is to be careful about sharing the details of your financial situation. This doesn't mean you need to be secretive about money with everyone. Your financial advisor obviously needs to know the details, and you might choose to share some information with a spouse or adult child who helps manage your affairs. But there's a big difference between sharing with those few trusted people and telling everyone about your savings, investments, or what's in your will. I've heard from so many viewers who got into difficult situations because they shared too much about their finances. Think about it. When people know exactly how much money you have, it can change how they treat you, often in subtle ways you might not even notice at first. And sadly, seniors are targeted for financial scams more than any other age group. Last year alone, people over 70 lost billions of dollars to scams and financial exploitation. A lot of these scams start with someone knowing just enough about your financial situation to gain your trust or to know what might tempt you. I've found it helpful to think about financial information in terms of circles. In the innermost circle, you might share everything with a spouse or partner. In the next circle, you might give your adult children general information, enough so they know you're secure, but not necessarily the exact numbers. And for everyone else, friends, neighbors, acquaintances, there's really no need to share specifics at all. You can talk about your values around money or your approach to saving without mentioning dollar amounts. I remember meeting a couple, let's call them Tom and Patricia, who told me they used to freely discuss their investments and retirement savings with friends at dinner parties. They noticed that gradually those friendships changed. Some friends started asking for loans, others seemed to expect them to always pick up the check, and still others seemed to resent them. When they pulled back and became more private about their finances, their relationships actually improved. They still enjoyed their friends' company, but without the complications that money talk had introduced. Let me be clear. This isn't about being secretive or dishonest. It's about recognizing that financial details are personal, and sharing them widely rarely serves you well. You can still be authentic and honest without telling everyone the balance in your retirement account. You can say, "We're comfortable," or "We've planned carefully for retirement," without getting into specifics. This approach protects you not just from people who might take advantage, but also from the subtle shifts in relationships that often happen when financial information becomes public knowledge. Think of it as creating a protective boundary around an area of your life that doesn't need to be public. The second area where privacy can protect your peace is health information. Now, this one can be tricky, because when you're dealing with health challenges, support from others can be incredibly valuable. But there's a difference between getting support from a few trusted people and making your health problems the main topic of every conversation. I've noticed that many of us, as we get older, fall into the habit of giving detailed medical reports whenever someone asks, "How are you?" We share test results, medication changes, symptoms, and doctor's appointments in great detail, sometimes with people we barely know. While it might seem like a natural topic of conversation, constantly talking about health problems can actually make them loom larger in your mind. Research shows that the stories we tell most often become the ones that shape how we see ourselves. If most of your conversations revolve around health problems, you might start to see yourself primarily as a person with health problems, rather than as someone with a rich, multifaceted life who happens to be managing some health issues. I heard from a viewer named Robert who realized he'd fallen into this pattern. Every time he met friends for coffee, the first 20 minutes would be spent comparing medical updates. He decided to experiment with changing the subject after a brief acknowledgement of how he was feeling. "Fine, managing the usual arthritis. How about those Yankees?" At first it felt strange, but soon he noticed that his social time became more enjoyable. His health challenges didn't go away, but they stopped dominating his social life. He told me, "I still have the same aches and pains, but they don't control my day anymore. I've remembered that I'm more than my health chart." This doesn't mean you should never talk about health concerns. Of course, you need to be open with your doctors, and having a few trusted confidants to share worries with is important. But consider being more selective about how much health information you share and with whom. Maybe save the detailed updates for your spouse or best friend, and give others just the basic overview. This helps protect your identity from becoming too wrapped up in your health status. The third area where privacy can protect your peace is family conflicts or challenges. Every family has its tensions and disagreements. Maybe you're worried about an adult child's financial decisions, frustrated with a grandchild's life choices, or dealing with sibling rivalries that have persisted for decades. These situations can be painful and stressful, and it's natural to want to talk them through with someone. But sharing family conflicts widely, especially with other family members who aren't directly involved, often makes the situation worse, not better. When we talk about family conflicts with extended family or friends, a few things tend to happen. First, the person you're talking to only hears your side of the story, which can create biased perceptions of your family members. Second, information has a way of traveling. What you share in confidence might get back to the person you were talking about, causing more hurt feelings and deepening the conflict. And third, once you've publicly criticized a family member, it can be harder to reconcile because now you have to deal with not just the original issue, but also the breach of privacy. I remember a woman named Eleanor who was deeply worried about her son's marriage. She found herself discussing her concerns with her bridge club, her neighbors, even people at church. When her son found out that his private struggles were being discussed so widely, he was understandably hurt and angry. Their relationship, already strained, became even more difficult to repair. Eleanor realized too late that while she needed support, she should have been more selective about where she sought it. A better approach might have been to talk through her concerns with a counselor, a clergy member bound by confidentiality, or one trusted friend who didn't know her son personally. This would have given her the emotional support she needed without compromising her relationship with her son. This doesn't mean you should never seek advice about family challenges, but consider getting that support from sources that maintain appropriate boundaries, perhaps a counselor, a support group where members don't know your family, or one or two very trusted friends who understand the need for discretion. And focus more on your own feelings and responses to the situation rather than sharing every detail about what others in your family have said or done. This approach respects the privacy of all family members while still allowing you to process your own emotions. If you've ever found yourself choosing to keep certain family matters private to protect relationships, you might want to comment "Yes" below this video. I think many of us have learned this lesson through experience, and your wisdom might encourage others who are navigating similar situations. The fourth area where privacy protects peace is personal insecurities and fears. As we get older, we all face new challenges and concerns. Maybe you worry about memory lapses and whether they're normal aging or something more serious. Perhaps you're anxious about maintaining independence, concerned about being a burden to family, or struggling with changes in your appearance or abilities. These feelings are completely normal, but sharing them indiscriminately can sometimes magnify them rather than relieve them. When you repeatedly voice a fear or insecurity to many different people, you're essentially practicing and reinforcing that fear in your own mind. Each time you articulate it, the neural pathways associated with that fear get stronger. Plus, different people will respond differently to your disclosure. Some might dismiss your concerns, others might overreact, and still others might share their own similar fears, potentially increasing your anxiety. I heard from a viewer named William who started noticing some minor memory issues, forgetting names occasionally or misplacing his keys. At first, he mentioned these concerns to everyone: his children, his neighbors, his golf buddies, even the cashier at the grocery store. He noticed that the more he talked about his fears, the more anxious he became about every small memory lapse. Plus, he started to feel like people were watching him, waiting for him to forget something. Eventually, he decided to take a different approach. He had a thorough checkup with his doctor to rule out any medical issues, and then he chose to discuss any ongoing concerns only with his wife and his doctor. With everyone else, he redirected conversations to other topics. He told me that almost immediately he felt less anxious. The memory lapses didn't go away. They're a normal part of aging for many people. But they stopped dominating his thoughts and conversations. This isn't to say you should never share your fears or insecurities. Having confidants who know your vulnerabilities and still love and support you is incredibly valuable. But consider being selective about who those confidants are. Choose people who have shown themselves to be trustworthy, empathetic, and balanced in their responses. And remember that not every fear needs to be voiced aloud to everyone you meet. Sometimes, writing in a journal, talking with a counselor, or sharing with just one trusted person is enough to process your concerns without amplifying them through constant discussion. The fifth and final area where privacy can protect your peace involves spiritual doubts, existential questions, or evolving beliefs. Many of us were raised with certain religious or philosophical beliefs that shaped our understanding of the world. As we age and accumulate life experiences, it's natural for some of those beliefs to evolve or for new questions to arise. Maybe you're questioning aspects of your faith tradition that once seemed straightforward. Perhaps you're wrestling with big questions about purpose, mortality, or the meaning of suffering. These deep, personal explorations are a normal and valuable part of aging, but they don't always need to be shared widely, especially when they're still in process. When we're working through complex spiritual or philosophical questions, we need space for reflection. Sharing evolving thoughts too soon or too widely can sometimes complicate this process. Other people may jump in with their own strong opinions, try to fix your doubts, or feel threatened if your questions touch on beliefs they hold dear. You might find yourself defending or explaining a perspective that's still taking shape in your own mind. I remember a woman named Margaret who had been an active member of her religious community all her life. After her husband died, she found herself questioning certain beliefs that had previously seemed unshakable. Rather than discussing these questions immediately with her church friends, she chose to explore them privately through reading, journaling, and conversations with a spiritual director who was trained to provide guidance without judgment. Over time, she developed a more nuanced understanding that actually deepened her faith rather than diminishing it. When she eventually shared some of her journey with close friends, she was able to articulate her evolved perspective clearly rather than pulling them into her process of questioning. This privacy around spiritual exploration isn't about being dishonest or inauthentic. It's about recognizing that our deepest questions deserve space and time to develop before being exposed to the opinions and reactions of others. It's perfectly fine to say, "I'm still thinking about that," or "My understanding of that is evolving," without feeling obligated to detail every step of your spiritual journey. Save those deeper discussions for spaces where genuine dialogue is possible, with a spiritual advisor, in a small group specifically designed for such exploration, or with friends who have demonstrated their ability to discuss different perspectives with respect and openness. Now that we've covered these 5 areas where privacy can protect your peace, let's talk about how to actually maintain healthy boundaries in a world that often encourages oversharing. First, remember that you don't need to answer every question you're asked. If someone inquires about something you prefer to keep private, whether it's your financial situation, health concerns, family challenges, personal insecurities, or spiritual questions, it's perfectly acceptable to gently redirect the conversation. You might say, "That's not something I discuss much, but I'd love to hear about your recent trip." Or, "I'm still working through that privately, but thanks for your concern." Most people will respect a politely established boundary. It's also helpful to prepare some standard responses for commonly asked questions. If people often ask about your health, you might decide in advance to say, "I'm managing well, thanks for asking. How about you?" If financial topics come up frequently in your social circle, you might prepare a general comment like, "We've planned carefully and feel fortunate," without going into specifics. Having these responses ready can help you maintain your boundaries without feeling caught off guard. In today's digital world, online privacy deserves special attention. Many seniors are active on social media platforms like Facebook, which can be wonderful for staying connected with family and friends who live far away. But these platforms also make it easy to share more than might be wise. Before posting about health challenges, family situations, or other sensitive topics, take a moment to consider whether this information needs to be shared with your entire online network. Remember that once something is posted online, it can be difficult to truly delete it, and you have limited control over who eventually sees it. If you want to share updates with family, consider using private messaging or email rather than public posts. You might also want to regularly review your privacy settings on social media platforms, as these often change without much notice. Creating physical space for privacy is important too. Even if you live with family or in a communal setting, try to carve out some area that's just for you. A comfortable chair in a quiet corner, a desk where you can write or read undisturbed, or even just a regular time of day when you can expect some solitude. Having physical space for private reflection helps reinforce the psychological boundaries we've been discussing. One thing I've noticed is that privacy sometimes gets confused with secrecy or dishonesty, but they're really not the same thing. Privacy is about having control over your personal information and sharing it selectively, with intention. Secrecy often carries a connotation of hiding something shameful or harmful. You can be an open, authentic person while still maintaining healthy privacy boundaries. In fact, the people who share everything with everyone often aren't sharing their authentic selves at all. They're performing for an audience or seeking validation rather than genuinely connecting. Real connection happens when we share selectively and meaningfully with people who have earned our trust. Think about your most valued relationships. They probably involve mutual sharing of thoughts, feelings, and experiences, but that sharing happens within appropriate boundaries. You don't tell your deepest fears to someone you just met, and you don't expect your closest friend to share every detail of their life with casual acquaintances. These boundaries aren't walls that keep people out. They are more like the walls of a home, creating a safe space where real intimacy can flourish. As we age, maintaining these boundaries can become both more challenging and more important. More challenging because we might find ourselves in situations where others, adult children, healthcare providers, financial advisors, need to know more about our personal business than was previously the case. More important because our sense of dignity and autonomy can be closely tied to our ability to control our personal information. Finding the balance requires ongoing attention and adjustment. It's okay to revisit your boundaries and change them as your circumstances change. Maybe you previously kept health information private, but now need to share more details with a family member who's helping coordinate your care. Or perhaps you've always been open about finances, but now feel a need for more privacy in that area. Your boundaries are yours to set and adjust as needed. It's also worth noting that different cultures and generations often have different norms around privacy. If you grew up in a time when personal matters were kept private as a matter of course, you might find today's sharing culture uncomfortable or inappropriate. Conversely, if you grew up in a family where everything was discussed openly, you might find it difficult to understand why others are so guarded about certain topics. Neither approach is inherently right or wrong. What matters is finding the balance that supports your well-being and respects the autonomy of others. There's a fascinating body of research on the relationship between privacy and well-being in older adults. Studies consistently show that people who maintain appropriate privacy boundaries report higher levels of life satisfaction and lower levels of stress compared to those who either share everything or keep everything private. The key seems to be finding that middle ground, selective sharing with trusted others, combined with preservation of private space for personal processing. This balanced approach supports what psychologists call autonomy, our sense of being in control of our own lives and making our own choices. Autonomy is consistently linked to well-being at all ages, but it becomes especially important as we navigate the changes and potential losses that often come with aging. One particularly valuable practice is journaling or private reflection on experiences before deciding whether or when to share them with others. This gives you time to process your own thoughts and feelings without immediately filtering them through others' reactions. You might find that after this private reflection, you have a clearer sense of what aspects of an experience are important to share and with whom. This practice can be especially helpful when dealing with complex emotions or situations where your initial reaction might change upon further reflection. As we consider how to maintain healthy privacy boundaries, it's worth thinking about legacy, what we want to pass on to future generations. Not every experience or lesson needs to be shared explicitly to have an impact. Sometimes, our most powerful influence comes not from telling all our stories, but from modeling values like dignity, resilience, and thoughtful boundary setting. I've heard from many viewers who are creating legacy journals or recordings for their grandchildren, carefully curated collections of experiences, values, and wisdom they want to pass on. These aren't comprehensive accounts of every challenge or struggle, but thoughtfully selected stories that illustrate important principles or insights. This approach honors both the value of sharing wisdom and the importance of appropriate privacy. I want to emphasize that maintaining privacy boundaries isn't about isolation or disconnection. Quite the opposite. When we share selectively and intentionally, we often create the conditions for deeper, more authentic connection. Think about the people with whom you feel most deeply connected. Chances are these relationships involve mutual respect for appropriate boundaries rather than indiscriminate sharing of every thought and feeling. Trust develops when we demonstrate both openness where appropriate and respect for privacy where needed. As we wrap up this discussion of privacy and inner peace, I want to leave you with a few practical thoughts. First, remember that your privacy boundaries are yours to set and adjust. What feels right for someone else might not be right for you, and what worked for you at one stage of life might need adjustment as circumstances change. Second, when in doubt about whether to share something, consider waiting. You can always choose to share information later, but once shared, it cannot be unshared. And finally, trust your instincts. If sharing certain information feels uncomfortable or seems like it might lead to complications, honor that feeling. Your accumulated wisdom and life experience have given you valuable intuition about where boundaries serve you best. I hope this video has given you some food for thought about how privacy can protect your inner peace. It's a topic that deserves more attention, especially in our current culture that often equates sharing with authenticity. If you're ready to implement even one privacy-protecting practice in your life, comment "change" below. Your commitment might inspire others to consider where stronger boundaries could enhance their well-being too. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences with this topic in the comments. Thank you for being part of the Wisdom After 70 community by subscribing. Until next time, may you find the perfect balance of connection and privacy that brings you peace, purpose, and joy in this chapter of your life.